Welcome to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy, where we hear from top educators, entrepreneurs, and creative thinkers on how to design your future. What's up, everyone? It's Domenico and Lincoln here, and welcome back to Season 2 of the Keeping It Real podcast. And we are going to open up the season with something that's very near and dear to our hearts, and that is what to do about our high school education system today.
Absolutely.
So Real World Academy has serendipitously become a lifeline for high school students in the tri-state area who aren't being given the proper mentorship to succeed in life. So I want to ask Lincoln, what is the origin story behind this phenomenon, and how did Real World Academy go from being a fledgling nonprofit with a few private students only a year or two ago to facilitating state-of-the-art professional development curriculum in high schools around New Jersey? So what is so unique about what we teach?
Well, it started first with my vision of opening up a school. Mm-hmm. That's where it's all like, and that was 20 years ago. So I'm old. And I've been having this dream for a long time. So never give up on your dreams, right?
Yeah.
But it started with my thinking that, in order for us to change things, to make things better, or whatever you want to do, whatever change you want to see happen, you have to start with young people. Because older people, we're too far gone. Mm-hmm. We're set in our ways. We already know what we know, and we're not really going to change. But young people are built for change. They're constantly changing over the course of 16 years, right? And so they're sponges too. So if you're going to do something, if you're going to change a direction of a community or a society, you only need to grab one generation to do that. Mm-hmm. So my desire to help people decided the only way to help people is to help them help themselves. So the only way to do that is to take hold of a generation, if you want to have the biggest impact, and train them up in the way you want them to go. So where else can you do that but in a school, right? Now, you could say, well, we can go to a school, you can become a teacher and teach in somebody's school and do whatever you want to do. But the problem is that you can't do this work in one class, right? And so you got to have like the entire environment built around whatever this concept you're trying to deliver, right? So it's similar to the military and boot camp. When you go to boot camp, you go in and you're there. Like, you have no external stimuli. You can't see television. You can't see anybody you know. There's nothing. You only know what boot camp gives you. And so it's total reprogramming, right? And that's why they like the younger the better. And they don't really take anybody over the age of like 34 or 35 now, right? So they're saying, listen, we can grab you, put you in this environment for about 6 to 8 weeks, and every day, 24 hours a day, you're eating, breathing, living this new life and learning new values and new skills. And so even if you don't become someone completely different, which doesn't necessarily happen, there's still things that will never leave you, right? There's still things that will always stick with you, and things you can resort back to if you ever wanted to, right? So that's the best part about it. It's not saying that we're going to make you into something that we want you to be. That's the only way to instill in you certain values that have to override, or maybe new values that your parents or whoever society before we got you didn't have. So that's the whole concept around boot camp, right? So the philosophy I carried over into education is saying, listen, if we want to really make impact, because people talk about making impact, but you can't make impact by teaching one person here, teaching two people here, teaching this class for 20 years. Like, as a field goal, say, oh, if you only do one, you can only save, if you save just one, that's great and all, but the math don't add up, okay? Yeah. So if you want to bang for your buck, you got to invest.
So I want to back up and take a second to identify the problem. You mentioned earlier, you need the structure of a school in order to get this work done.
Right.
What exactly is that work, and why is it not present in schools already?
So the work is all on you. I think we are taught and we teach people to look for the answers outside. But really the work starts here. So the class that we now teach at the high school is first we start with the ninth graders, knowing yourself, right? Who are you? Why do you do what you do? Why do you behave the way you behave? Why do you say the things that you say? Why is it that you and another person can sit in the same classroom, but one person's paying attention and you're not, right? Why is it that if I leave something here, one person steals and another person doesn't?
So it's introspection is what you're teaching in many ways.
It teaches you to be introspective, but it's really trying to understand who you are as a person. Why do you do what you do? How do you tick? You know, what drives you? What's your motivation? What are your values, right? There are values that create character, right? And then there's your personality. So your personality is what everybody sees and deals with on a regular basis. It can change. You know, you adapt your personality to your environment. But your character never changes, right? Your character is who you are. Like it forms your moral fiber, your moral compass, right? It's right and wrong, okay? So your personality kind of acts within that and kind of very much more adaptive. But who are you? You know, why do you practice religion? And that religion now forms a basis of who you are as a person. You know, why do you eat certain foods and not others, right? All these things make you into who you are and affect your decision making. It affects the way you see yourself and the way you see others. Perspective is very important.
So what are the effects of coming into school as a freshman and then doing a self-assessment,
Right.
understanding your behaviors, your strengths and weaknesses, your interests? Where do you take that, and how do you continue to evolve that throughout the rest of the 4 years of high school?
I will say, like, you have to spend a lot of time developing the idea, understanding the idea that you have to know yourself. But the only way to truly know yourself is to look into your past. What makes you? So there's only really two things that make you in this world. And everyone is made up the same way. Your parents and your family make you in one aspect, and then your community and your environment makes you in the other.
Yeah.
The two together is what forms a foundation. Your foundation is your values, your character. That's everything your decision making is all based on. Your moral compass is all based on. So if you don't really understand your family history, your parents, you know, their decisions, their beliefs, if you don't understand who they are, it's going to be very difficult to understand who you are, because you are literally a product of them.
So you're having students literally identify certain aspects of their family history in class.
Yeah. Yeah.
And allowing students to find out for themselves how that's impacted them.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? What do you tell students to do, and what do they come back with?
So right now we haven't been able to do it for the whole year. That's the design is for a whole year, and it would be a process. So in this, we have a condensed version going on right now in one of the high schools, and the condensed version looks like we tell them to interview their parents, essentially. You ask the person 20 questions, and you get whatever information you get from them, right? And that's really a conversation starter. It doesn't mean like you just have to go interview, okay, question number 1, question number 2. But hopefully you ask a question, it spins off into a dozen other questions, right? Or you just have this conversation you didn't expect.
And what are the impacts of those conversations that you've seen?
They all have said that I learned something new about my parent. I knew a lot, but I don't know even more. Or some of them have said, I never knew this at all, you know, and then a lot of them never really had a conversation with their parents that they didn't have to have.
Right.
Right. So especially one about them, like about their parents. So the parents are even caught off guard by like, oh, wow, you want to know more about me. So it's eye-opening in a lot of ways for the students, and it's really helpful to develop a new relationship between the parent and the child, to be quite honest. You know, now they realize they have a lot more in common than they thought, and that even though the parent may act a particular way, the parent really does care about the things that the student cares about as well.
Yeah. And I would assume that students having an adult conversation with their parents puts them in a frame of mind where they're more mature too, because they're being spoken to by their parent on an equal level, on a human level, not in a way that's disciplinary.
Right.
So can you speak some more to that in terms of how you teach students to think of themselves as adults and take on responsibility?
Well, first thing I don't do is I don't do a lot of coddling and hand-holding in the classroom. We go over certain definitions. One definition is accountability. What is that? Take ownership of everything you say and do, right? That means if you said it, you said it. If you did it, you did it. Doesn't matter who made you do it, who said what. Did it come out of your mouth? Did you actually perform that action?
And for what percentage of high school students is this a novel idea, or is it something that they know intrinsically?
They don't know about they don't know about accountability. They can always blame someone else, right? That's not my fault. He made me do it. He made me laugh, or I mean, that's something that we used to say growing up too. But now it's always someone else's fault for why they do what they do.
Is it something in our culture or in our education system that promotes that?
Well, the culture, yes, definitely. I mean, education system is built from the culture too. So the culture is definitely where it starts. I mean, Western culture is built on what can you prove, not really what you actually did, right? And we've seen that happen all the time. Somebody could do something. We all seen it happen. But the lawyers go in and make a really good case, and next thing you know, they're walking out of the courtroom, right? Yeah. So it's all about what you can prove, right? So in a lot of ways, people escape accountability all the time, and it's kind of built into the culture. When someone can get a hot cup of coffee and then blame the person who made the coffee for spilling it on them.
But your approach is that if students take time to know themselves, find out who they are, they develop an intrinsic value system,
right,
that encompasses personal accountability.
Absolutely.
And that's why you start with your family history, how your past and how your personal and collective past has made you who you are.
Well, we first start with trying to understand before we even get to that's kind of like the final project, but before we get there, we first take them on a journey of relevancy, because you always have to make sure that people understand what's the point. Why am I taking this class? What's the point of this? Why do I need to know this? So you got to take them on the path of relevancy. This is important because, right? And we go into all the details on that. So one of the things you have to do is understand the past. Why is the past important? Because, right? Then you talk about people in the past and how they shaped other individuals. So you may have the Madam C.J. Walker, right, who was one of the first Black female millionaires ever, right? And then now we have a Rihanna, right? Now Madam C.J. Walker was in the beauty industry. Now Rihanna is a multimillionaire in the beauty industry, right? Not saying that Rihanna actually looked to Madam C.J. Walker, but understand that this happened in the past. There's this individual who paved the way for others who are now able to do it, right? So there's a saying that actually one of our colleagues in Real World Academy said to me, and I said, I'm going to steal that, by the way. And she says, Kamisha actually said it. She says, I drink heavily from a well that I did not dig. And
I remember her saying that.
Yeah, that was powerful, And so, we're all benefiting from those who came before us, which was also important for the students to understand. You didn't just sit here just because. 40, 60 years ago, you could not sit here.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that long ago, right? But people had to make sacrifices for you to do that, which also ties in, because everything we say and do ties into something else that we're going to say and do. So if I say to them, for example, going off with the whole, people have done this before, people have paved the way for you, goes back to now parenting, right?
Yeah.
Your parents have paved the way for you to be able to go to school, to get an education, to be successful. And a lot of them don't, and no fault of their own, none of us really appreciated our parents when we're young. We just take it for granted. I mean, that's just the nature of being a child. You take everything for granted.
And you're also, being a teenager is a difficult transition period in that you are physically getting older. You're physically capable of being, independent in many ways. So you're struggling to do that, which is why students rebel. But you are kind of being told what to do every waking moment of your day.
Yeah.
So I do understand the agitation that students have in a classroom setting.
Yeah.
But I think, what you're doing, you're able to provide context as to why they're there and why it's important to be learning this subject matter. Do you see the light bulb go off for any students? Do you see that switch happening?
Carlene would say when they're not saying anything, they're processing. This is all new, and this is adults do the same thing. If you say this kind of stuff and they're quiet, and they're making eye contact with you, right? And they're not saying anything, a lot of times they're just processing. What we're saying a lot of times isn't new stuff, but we're saying in a different way. Again, perspective. We're looking at it a different way that you haven't looked at it before. I'm literally saying things that they've heard before, but I'm doing it in a different way. And they're like, oh my goodness, I never thought of it like that. Right?
What's an example? Can you think of one?
That's a good question. Let me think. So I just talk about, for example, like your parents are human, aren't they? Right? Something very common. Aren't your parents human? Yeah. Don't humans make mistakes? Yeah. So why can't your parent make a mistake?
Right.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, seeing parents as human beings is not something that happens, I feel like, until your 20s.
Well, you don't be. But you do know it. You just don't think of it that way.
Understand.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, if I say to you, if I say tell your parents humans, you will say absolutely. Like really quick. Your parents are human beings.
But that's not the default.
Your
thing.
perspective of what a human and a parent, that you're not making the connection on your own. Someone has to remind you, okay, so if parents are humans and humans make mistakes, why can't your parent make a mistake? And then they say, oh, you're right. Like you have to make the connection because they can't see it in their childhood state, right? You only see it when you get older because now you're making mistakes.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
See, before, when you made a mistake as a kid, somebody always cleaned it up. But now you're making a mistake and you're dealing with the mistake. You're accountable now and you have to take responsibility for that stuff and somebody's punishing you because now you're getting in trouble for that. Now you're like, oh, man, I get it now. You know, you got to go through the experience.
So you're introducing these ideas of accountability, but also humility at a very young age. How do you put those into practice, and how do you give the students real-world context for these lessons?
So I always use just examples in everyday life. I mean, there are examples all around us that we're dealing with every day. So it's just, I'm kind of doing these things on the fly, depending on what students have said in the class. And I said, well, didn't you just say this? And I put it in a different perspective for them. So, trying to use, and when you say what are the real world examples I use, it varies. I mean, it depends on what I'm talking about in that moment. It depends on what they've said, because sometimes I go off what they say tells me what examples are best for them. Not every example that I've been through they are going to relate to. So I got to use an example that they are familiar with and they can relate to.
Right. And so after you allow students to do this self-examination and you introduce ideas of personal accountability, where does it go from there? What's the rest of their journey look like with Real World Academy?
So then we start talking about, what do you want? You're in high school right now. You're starting off this journey. Where are you going to be in 4 years? Don't think it's, far off.
Yeah.
How fast did 8th grade go? They said it went by fast. Okay, so you don't think 9th grade going to go by fast? How fast did middle school go?
Yeah.
It went by fast. So you don't think high school can go by fast? So why wait? Why wait to start thinking about this? Let's start thinking about it now, right? Let's start writing things down now. Everyone should be writing. Everybody should be writing their thoughts. Doesn't matter what the thoughts are. Just write it down. If you ever thought about your future, I want to be an astronaut, write that down. Revisit that later on, maybe a couple months, next year. Your sophomore self, are you still want to be an astronaut? No, but I want to be in science. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Write things down. Talk to people, right? Who's in your network? Who's in your friends? Like, do you really want to be with these people every day? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the type of people you want to grow up with and be around? Ask yourself. Maybe right now it is, but maybe later it's not. What are your values?
I have this theory that maybe you could confirm or deny, and it's that, especially today with all the helicopter parenting that's going on, students are so petrified to make a decision for themselves. They're so used to having their parents and or their teachers just tell them what to do.
Yep.
So when it comes time for them to confront questions like, what do you want to do after high school? They're petrified.
So you got to start early. You got to start early with your children and giving them some responsibility, right? Holding them accountable early for their decisions. They live with you. There's a giant safety net already. They're not going to, do anything too crazy that you can't control or allow. But start helping them make decisions by giving them choices and being and holding them accountable for those choices. So if they make a choice and it's the wrong choice, they got to deal with it. Don't clean it up. Deal with it, right? That's all right. And now you know how to make better choices next time. I guess you make a different choice. Now, I knew at the time that was the wrong choice for you, but hey, you got to deal with that, right? Why not? Whatever they can do, they should be allowed to do. Don't do anything for your children that they can do for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay? As soon as they're able to do something on their own, let them do it. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
What we got to start doing is asking the questions. Why do you do that? Even if you already know the answers. You have to get them to learn how to explain themselves and to think for themselves, why do I do that? Or why do I like this? Or why do I eat that? If you see a child only eats broccoli and don't eat, carrots, you ask them, why do you only eat broccoli? Why don't you eat carrots?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds mundane, but you're doing an exercise.
Right.
Like the exercise is getting them to think.
And getting them to be confident in their decision making.
And be confident enough to stand in their truth and say, I don't like this because. Okay?
Right.
They're afraid to speak their truth because of what people might say and think. You have to be able to say, if this is your truth, live in it, speak it. It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks.
Do you have an example where a student would feel too vulnerable to be themselves and how that changed over time? What is
and
that
how it changed over time?
Yeah. Without revealing too much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, naturally in every class you start off and people don't know each other, especially freshmen, you don't really know each other. So you may say, the class gets somewhat very personal and say, how many of here, don't like where they live or don't like their neighborhood, Now, most of them, from my experience, don't have a problem sharing that information. But, some people may not want to talk about if I say, okay, well, how is it? What about your family? What about if I ask questions about their home or their parents or, their family dynamic in any way, they may not want to share that because they're not happy about it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason that may be. And then after a while, they realize that in order to fix the problem, you have to address the problem, right? You can't fix a problem that you're not willing to address or face, And sometimes it's just a matter of trust in me and being able to eventually come out and say, hey, this is my issue and, I don't know what to do.
Right.
So every situation is a little different and everybody needs their time to come out to be their truthful self. I know when we were dealing with the seniors, I would say, how many of you are insecure, right? Now that came about because I want everybody to stand up when they talk. Say your name, stand up, say your name, speak loud, and tell me the answer to the question. They barely get up. And they're like, so my name is... Now I stopped and said, wait a minute. Now y'all was out in this hallway yelling, screaming, carrying on, and then you come in here and I can barely hear you. What's going on? And then they want to talk about they nervous, they insecure. Why? And I said, well, how many people are here insecure? Some people raise their hand. It's interesting today how honest the
I guess
kids
they're
are.
not that insecure if they were honest about it.
Or maybe they just feel comfortable with their peers because they've been with these people for 3 years by this point, right? Who knows? And of course, there's always going to be more who don't raise their hand, right? There's people who don't raise their hand and feel the same way. But the idea is that they're willing to say, I'm insecure. Now, I always tell them when I ask the question, I say, raise your hand high, live in your truth. I remind them, live in their truth. It doesn't matter what I think. You have to own it, because if you know this, you're insecure, what are you going to do to fix that so you can be more secure? And the reason why you need to do it, because if you're trying to go out there in the real world, you got to be able to stand before people and speak.
Yeah.
You can't expect somebody to come and grab you by the hand and say, come on, let's go. That's not how it's going to work. That's how it's been working for the last 15 years of your life, maybe, but that's not how it's going to work in the future. So you're 4 months out from graduation and you can't articulate your name. You can't say your name. You can't stand up. What's going on? So that kind of perspective I give is very important for them, because no one's ever challenged them that way. No one ever said, you got all that mouth any other time, you come in here and you ain't got nothing to say. No one's ever said that to them. No one's ever said, well, how are you going to survive out here if you can't speak up in here? See, they don't, again, this perspective, asking the question in a different way, getting them to see themselves in a different way, right? Because as the instructor, you have to be a mirror. You have to be able to say, this is what I'm seeing, right? I'm seeing someone who has all these dreams but don't know any way to get them. Because I'm asking you, how are you going to get there? And you can't give me an answer. So I'm saying to myself, well, you talking about going to college. How you going to get to college? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You got 4 months. What are you talking about you don't know?
And literally.
Like,
yeah.
Right. It's 4 months away. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Because I asked him, are you ready for life after graduation? You got 4 months, you got cross the stage, right? Are you ready for the next step? Oh, I'm ready. All right, so what's your plan? Well, I'm going to get a job. Where you going to work? I don't know yet. Well, you ain't ready. At no point should you say you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Not if you saying you're ready. Right? There's nothing wrong with not knowing, but don't tell me you're ready and I ask you a question, you can't give me the answer to it.
Right.
You going to college, you're saying. What college you going to? Well, I got 3 of them I could choose. You ain't pick one yet? How come you ain't pick one yet? What you waiting for them to tell you to come over there? What are you waiting for? Oh, you right. Well, you should have picked one by now. You don't know what college you're going to. You got 3 of them. You haven't figured out which one you're going to yet. What you going to study? Was either. Whoa, what do you mean it's either? What do you mean it's either? What are you going to study?
It's either medicine or theater.
Right. Like, what is it? And I say, because now they're quiet.
Yeah.
Right? Because no one has said it this way.
Well, that's a whole different problem. We'll get into the next episode, why they're not being told
exactly,
this
right?
But,
so no one has said it this way, right? So now they're quiet, and I say, it's okay to not know. It's okay not to be ready.
You have to confront that reality, right?
You have to what? Live in your truth. You can't walk around thinking that you're something that you're not.
Yeah.
You're not ready. You need to live in that and own it. So now that you accept the fact that you're not ready, now we can begin the process of getting ready.
So once you get students through this self-actualization boot camp, when it gets time for students to make decisions about what they want to do after school, what does that look like? What components of the Real World Academy help students answer that question?
So we do the resume writing, we do the appearance, the branding, which is making sure you understand how to dress for the job you want, how to carry yourself, how to network on the job, how to talk to people, especially in college, what to do while you're in college. Make sure you get internships, fellowships. So these are different facilitated conversations we have with them that they have to do. And the takeaways is the resume that they want to walk out with. So now they have this physical document to show who they are, for those who are going off to whatever they're going to do, whether it's college or getting a job. They know that once they get there, they have to begin building social capital, right?
What does that look like? I'm curious about the networking piece and how you give advice to students in terms of building a network that's strong and presenting themselves as professionals? What are
The
some
first
of the,
thing I tell them is change your attitude, because 90% of young people today have an attitude. Like, nobody wants to talk to you. Who wants to talk to you? You can't.
attitude in what way though? Is
Like,
it
they have a bad attitude. They
Okay.
don't. They're thinking they're owed something, right?
okay?
Like, people got to come to them, right? And they offer nothing in return. So you don't have anything to talk about. You want all of this, but you have nothing to talk about. You live in this world that everything is just supposed to happen for you. Like, where does you get that from? Like, you have to have conversation.
Where do they get that from?
Everywhere tells them that they are okay the way they are. So they haven't worked on anything.
Is that
you're perfect the way you are. No, you're not.
So is that social media? Is that
Everything.
the school system at
Everything.
large?
Everything tells them that. There is nobody telling them something different. So everything feeds them that narrative.
So we're seeing depression and anxiety rates amongst adolescents skyrocket to the point where it's a national tragedy. We're seeing basically every major data point of national education on the decline. And yet we have this culture that is, I don't even know if it's forgiving or if it's just, I don't even know how to describe it, but how did we get to a place where we've lost our academic discipline and our education discipline?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So let's back up for a second, right? Human beings do not want to be hurt, right? We avoid, and every creature avoids danger, conflict. It's just natural for us to just stay away from things that will cause us pain or discomfort, right? But human beings are the most complex creatures in the natural order, right? We create even more complex things, right? So you can't operate from your basic nature in a complex society because it just doesn't work. If you're an animal, you eat, you sleep, you procreate. That's basically your routine. It's a very simple life, and it works for you. Your animal is not building houses and communities and civilizations. So if they were, that eat, sleep, and procreate would not work, because how does the other pieces fit in, right? So because we're human beings, we have to do more than just our natural things, right? We have to do more than just eat, sleep, procreate, right? We have to now be more complex in even how we deal with things and how we address things, right? So when going back to the natural desire to shy away from danger, pain, or things of discomfort, that's a natural thing for us to do, okay? But because we deal with complex situations, we can't operate from that space. We can't deal with it. So now we have to learn how to deal with things that are uncomfortable. We do not deal with things that are uncomfortable. We find every way to kick it down the road, to avoid it at all costs, to not talk about it. The problem here is that the way human life is that eventually it will catch up to you. The complexities of human life always force you to somehow face those issues.
So you're saying that students are being coddled by the school system, by the culture at large, but still they're anxious and depressed. And the reason for that is
they're not taught how to deal with their problems.
And the real world problems catch up with them.
The real world
and they
problems,
don't know how to process it.
Exactly. Or they're currently dealing with real world problems that nobody wants to really get at, or they don't know how to deal with, right? Or they're not receptive to someone helping them deal with it because they've already been taught that you can't deal with this, I can't face it. They've already been told they're not strong enough to face anything. And you don't have to come
inadvertently,
and say,
though.
Right. I don't have to remember, teaching is not just me sitting down, this is this, this is this, this is that. Teaching is me being there and me not being there.
Yeah.
Okay? I teach by not being there. When I'm a parent and I'm not in my child's life, I'm teaching them as well. Okay? I'm teaching them when I'm not saying anything. I'm teaching them when I hold my glass a certain way, when I walk a certain way, right? Teaching happens all the time with children. They are literally sponges watching and mimicking everything you say and do. Your behaviors, your tones, your inflections, your body language, all of that you're teaching. So you don't even realize how much you've been teaching your children until you see it happen. You're like, where'd they get that from? And you're not realizing that 20 years ago, that was you.
So now students are coming out of high school and college being taught that the real world is a place where the directions and the answers are given to you. And then they wind up in a situation where they have to think for themselves. They have to make decisions based on what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And the predicament is that they don't know what they want because they don't know who they are and they don't know how to take on responsibility.
Correct.
Which leads to this tragedy.
So part of it is like they've been told that the real world, like you'll deal with it when you get there, basically, right? Don't worry about that right now.
Right. We won't bother teaching that in school.
We'll deal with that when you get there, right?
Yeah.
Or like, if your child asks about what are you doing, Mom? What bills? What's a bill? Don't worry about that. You worry about the wrong thing. Why are you worried about what bills? You don't gotta worry about bills. That's not what you do.
Yeah.
If they old enough to ask, they old enough to get an answer. Right? So why are we denying that? So they feel like that's for adults only, right? And it was a time we all kind of like had those conversations growing up when we were children, but this is a different time now. You can't be the same way. Society has changed and parenting has to change with it. Before I was telling the kids that I was had a conversation with students because a student said, but what about those parents that have, that the preacher's family and the kids is doing something completely opposite of being a preacher kid, mm-hmm. right? They, all kinds of crazy stuff. I said, number one, you don't know what goes on in that person's house, right? That's number one. So you can't, just because they look good on the outside doesn't mean it's all gravy on the inside, right? Number two, you don't know, a lot of times people who are successful, especially successful parents, and we sometimes equate finances to success, or good parenting, let me put it like that. We equate finances to good parenting. And a lot of people don't realize that people with successful or rich or well-off parents are also oftentimes more neglected than every other parent does with their kids.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
And those kids grow up with all the material things, but nothing filling their soul.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And so now those are the ones that you see depressed all the time, have all they act out in all kinds of ways.
And I think it's called Stockholm Syndrome, where it's like you're saying to yourself, everything is so great. Why do I feel so terrible?
Right. And you don't have an answer. You don't know why.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that can replace a parent's love. The love that a parent can give, especially at the right moments, And it's not saying that you miss something, you're a bad parent, you don't love your kids. But it's so interesting how, again, I'm quoting Kamisha when we talk about bookmarks. We have these bookmarks in our lives, right? That we remember. We remember these glimpses, right?
Yeah.
And some people will say, you were not there for me, right? And the parent's like, what are you talking about? I was there every day, right? But when they needed you, you weren't there at that moment.
Right.
The worst thing you can ever say to your child is saying, you're wrong. They're sharing with you, their truth.
And you're shooting it
and
down.
You're shooting it down without just accepting the fact that that's how they saw it at that moment. We're not saying that you're a bad parent. First of all, you're a human being. Again, you're a human being. You can't be everywhere all the time, mm-hmm. even with your kids. You don't know your kids you was in the military and you couldn't be there. You was, a 6-month deployment. Now your son is mad at you. You weren't there for my graduation. I was out there in Iraq. What was I supposed to do? But you can't say that.
Yeah.
You gotta say, you know what? You're right. I wasn't there. And I wish I was.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. You go there and you say that, it changes everything. Have you witnessed everything. That?
Oh,
yes, yeah. I have. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It changes everything because you know why? The child just wanted to be heard. They wanted their feelings to be recognized, okay? They wanted you to acknowledge how they felt.
Yeah.
That's all they needed. That's love. That's showing that you love me, and that's what I needed. You know why? They run around here and they try to get that from other people.
Yeah.
And it never works because what they needed is from the person who they needed from the most, which is their parent.
Yeah.
You know, so you try to run around here and fill it up with other people, with other kids. You have kids of your own, or, you know, likes on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reality is you needed that from your parent. You need to resolve that from your parent. A lot of parents say, well, you know, you even talk to parents, they say, oh, you're an adult now. You need to get over it. No. Even at 60.
Yeah.
You know, if you're still around, I got a problem. And I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It was 50 years ago, but I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, in some ways people say that's silly, you know, I don't, but why can't you just listen to the person and say, you know what, I was wrong. Or, you know, I wasn't there at that time. What does it hurt to say you wasn't there when you weren't there? You were, even if it's a legitimate reason for it, you were not physically there for your child at 10 years old when they needed. Their child don't know where you're at 10. They don't know that you're out saving the country or whatever you're doing, you know, working to put food on the table. Some people are out there working hard. They can't be there for their children all the time. But your child don't see that. Your child can't see that. So you have to explain to your children. That's why you should have done this earlier. That's why we tell parents all the time, you gotta talk to your children. You have to. You have to talk to your children. Explain as much as you can. Explain everything. They have questions, give them an answer. Because if you avoid it, you deny it, again, kicking it down the road because you're uncomfortable. Remember the avoidance. That's the only reason why you don't talk about it.
And then the kid won't ask questions anymore because they won't get the answer. They'll be afraid to ask.
They won't ask you. They'll learn not to ask questions. They'll learn that, you know, I asked my mom questions and she got mad at me, so I ain't asking nobody no more questions. You know,
and
that's
then
what
you're
they
quiet
do.
in the classroom.
They're quiet in the classroom. You see what I'm saying? They're afraid to talk. It's a spin-off. And it happens, I'm telling you, it happens all the time. When you grow up in a family where you can be heard and you have a voice, you carry that everywhere.
Yeah.
You carry that everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, man, who's this guy coming in here talking? Think he got... Because I want to be heard because I know I could be heard. My parents listen to me. They taught me, if you got something to say, you say it. You know?
And you could take on, not a parenting role as an instructor, but you could be that persona that listens and reflects and gives students the opportunity to express themselves.
Yes.
And I think that's what we've been dancing around in large part with this conversation is the Real World Academy curriculum is this self-actualization journey that students are going on.
Absolutely.
And your hypothesis is that students need to go through this at 15 and 16 so they're not confronted with a situation in their 20s.
The earlier, the better.
Yeah.
The earlier, the better. Now, the nature of the conversations required to be somewhat of a high school level. You really can't have the conversations really with a 4-year-old or 3-year-old, right? But you still should begin putting things in practice at the lowest possible ages. You know, asking the whys. Nothing wrong with asking your child why they did something, even if they can't answer back. You know, people don't talk to their babies because their babies don't talk back. You don't wait till your kid can talk before you start talking to them.
Right.
You know? And you always talk to your kids as if they truly understand everything you're saying, even if they don't.
Yeah. You
talk to them that way. You say, well, why would you do that? Help me out. You know? And they're going to stare at you and I'm like, listen, don't do that no more, okay? We don't do this because yada, 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 right? You get doing the habit of that, I'm telling you, it trains them to receive that kind of information. It also trains them how to say this as well because they learned how to talk from you.
Right.
Their vocabulary is your vocabulary, right? The way they think is the way you think, okay?
Right.
So whatever way you're talking to your children is how they're going to talk to you.
So I want to get back to the networking piece. And so besides students, frankly, needing an attitude adjustment, what are the other steps that Real World Academy takes to ensure that by the time you enter college or you enter a job, you're networking properly, you're branding yourself in a way that's competitive?
So we have the managing your brand class. We have the networking 101 class, which is networking 101, of course, is just the fundamentals of why it's important to network and how do you network, how do you go into a room and engage, how do you have like small talk or different types of conversations, which goes back to you got to be kind of able to walk into a room and talk to people, right? It comes like you got to get rid of that. Oh, I'm an introvert. Well, it doesn't matter if you think you're an introvert. You still got to get out there and just say hello, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. And then so talking about art of communication, that was another thing we talk about is art of communication. That's another course we do, and that's being able to just talk to someone regularly.
Yeah.
You know, finding something to talk about. You know, understand the importance of communication, both verbal and written.
And that it's a skill. I remember this really struck me when I was young. Somebody said, there's a reason why they call it social skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill you could learn.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with conversation. The art of conversation
Mm-hmm.
is something you could practice and
Mm-hmm.
learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's just such an underrepresented, point.
Yeah.
So,
And I think one of the things for me that touches for me is now all these are kind of business related. My background is in business, and so a lot of these are business related. At least I see it through a business lens. But one of the most, I shouldn't say most important. I don't want to say that, but one important class that I feel like people don't think about when it comes down to social emotional learning is the branding class. Like, how does managing your brand connect to social emotional learning and personal development? They can see it on the professional side, on the business side, but what does it do to me?
well, it ties into your self-image, doesn't it? It's how you see yourself.
Exactly,
So-
right? And how you portray yourself to others, right?
Which is based on how you see yourself. So if you see yourself as a loser who will never accomplish anything, you're going to
You're projecting that, right?
Yeah.
There are people who are really good actors as well, who can portray something
Yeah.
and be living a total lie in the back of their mind, right?
Yeah.
There's also people who can be really thinking that they are something that they're really not,
Right.
right? But so branding is really understanding that when you walk out the door, okay, you are communicating with everyone. You're telling everyone about you, whether you realize it or not. We're all walking around announcing who we are, okay? When I walk into a room and I hold my head down, I'm saying something. When I walk in a room and I hold my head up, I'm saying something, okay? What I'm saying may differ for the people receiving the message, but it's very similar, right? So that's why you go into the room, you say, what do you think that guy, who do you think that guy is? I don't know, but he's this, he's that. They already have all these adjectives for you already. Don't even know what you are, who you are, right?
Yeah.
How they come up with that? Because they're basing on how you look, how you carry yourself.
Body language.
What you said, right? Now, our culture has defined certain aspects of branding, right?
Right.
So one culture may have a totally different perspective than the other on this premise. So looking at just the United States culture or the Western culture of things, there are certain things that we just see a person and we make assumptions about that person based on how they present themselves.
Right.
So this is why branding is so important. When you talk about networking, people will network with you based on your brand.
Right.
Okay? If they feel that you know what you're talking about, if they feel that you are someone who's worth being around, getting to know, they're going to be more inclined to talk to you, engage you, whatever have you, right? At the same time, if you are an insecure person, if you're a timid person, shy person, someone who is confident may frighten you. You be like, oh, I don't know what to say to this person. I don't know.
And you may give off the vibe that you could be taken advantage of. So
True. Yeah. So, everything we do gives off a message. We're talking all the time. And I think we need to understand that appearances matter. And we don't like to say that in our society. We don't like to say, looks matter. it sounds very vain.
Yeah, but it's deeper than that.
Right.
It's not vain because it's not just talking about physical appearance. It's about how you present yourself to
How
the
you
world,
present
just as you
yourself.
say.
Exactly. I'm not saying that you have to be pretty. What's the definition of pretty? What's the definition of handsome? I mean, that's all subjective. What I'm saying is that you have to know how you're coming off to other people.
Yeah.
Now, going back to branding just out of the physical, also, what do you say? How do you say it? If every time you talk, you're yelling, what are you saying? Right? What are you
You're
telling
saying you're an
everyone?
aggressive, insecure person.
Right. You know what I mean? That's your interpretation. Now, the
Yeah.
person who's saying it may not even be that, may not even thought about it.
Yeah.
But understand it's not about what you think you are. It's about what other people are going to think that you are. And then the question is, why do I care what other people think? Because you need people.
Yeah.
Like, that's the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
You got and it's crazy. Again, this is perspective, right? You say, all right, has anybody ever heard of a hookup? Yeah. Well, how'd you get the hookup? Because someone hooked you up, right? Someone put you on. Someone gave you an opportunity. Someone helped you jip the line. Someone gave you something, right? Why would they do that for you? You ain't nobody to them, are you? You are. They like you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They like you. They know you. So that's why they say, sure, let me hook my mans up. That's my man. That's my guy right there. He's my friend.
Yeah.
I hook him up. So don't say you don't need nobody because we get it all the time.
Right. That doesn't happen on its own.
We look for hookups all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When you can't get something done at the post office, you know what I'm saying? You know somebody who work at the post office, what you do? You call them up and say, hey, I need this because the line is crazy or the people give me a hard time. That happens all the time. Whenever you need some help getting through a barrier, you're calling somebody up because you need something.
So I'll end it with a story that reminds me of this situation. So when I first got to college, music school, and I was, networking with my classmates and with the professors, and there was this one kid who I really wanted to work with because I really liked his stuff.
Right.
And to be honest, I was a little intimidated to confront him because he had this quiet demeanor and didn't really talk to a lot of other students. So, it took me a while to start up a conversation with him, but ended up talking to him and said, look, man, I really love your music. I think, we have a lot of potential if we were to work together on a project. And I've honestly been wanting to do this for a while. I just haven't been able to get a hold of you. So what do you think? And he said, man, I've been wanting to work with you for months. I was just so intimidated because you're so quiet and you don't talk to anyone. He was like, I've been wanting to have this conversation ever since we started. So, he flipped it on me.
But same reason that kept you from talking to him was the same reason kept you from talking to him.
Yeah. So I had a moment where I had to be like, okay, I got to be a little more outgoing and friendly in order to not be perceived the way that I was perceiving this person.
Right.
So,
and not realizing that you were being perceived the exact
same way. And I had no idea. I was just shy, but he interpreted that as me being intimidating.
Right.
So
when I was in NJCU, I went to New Jersey University, I was in student government, right? Which is, by the way, I encourage everyone who goes to college, you got to get involved.
Yeah.
Got to get involved. Join an organization, go student government if you want to, but definitely get involved in a student organization or found your own student organization. But anyway, so we're in student organization. Now, keep in mind, I was older than most people in school at the time, especially in the student government. I mean, most times people go to college at 17, 18 years old. By this point, I'm like 23, 24. Looking back, it's not that much older, but
that gap
it
matters.
Definitely is a gap, yes.
Yeah.
So we're in student government, and one of the girls from another group says to me, afterwards, she says, Lincoln, it's just that when you talk, as soon as you open your mouth, we just hold our breath. I'm like, what? Because we don't know what you're going to say. I'm like, what are you talking? I did not know
that people perceived you that way.
I did not know that they were like that intimidated by when I talk, right?
Yeah.
And then even people say, when you come into the room, it's like you have a presence, and I'm like, what? I never thought about it,
Yeah.
And my dad always said, you got to walk with your head high all the time. You always walk with your head up, chest out. And I didn't realize how many people don't do that.
Yeah.
And so for those who do that,
It's a thing.
it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know, people are like, whoa, who's this guy? I don't know
Yeah.
me. I'm like, anybody walking look like that ain't nothing impressive to me because I do the same thing.
Yeah.
So ain't nothing here. But I didn't realize that other people, it mattered to them. So yeah, impressions, you know, especially the first ones are important. They do matter. And our image, our brand matters. And the other thing about brand is also your values. You know, people can say, you know what? Lincoln is many things, but he's not this.
Yeah.
Right? And the question is, what can people say about you? They have to speak to your character, right? What are you saying? And that goes by your actions, your deeds, right? The way you talk to people, but also what you do every day, how you live your life,
Yeah.
right? How you act out professionally. People are going to have an impression about you based on that. And they're going to say, no, every time, Lincoln is a trustworthy person, right? And they're going to say that based on their experiences with you.
Yeah.
Okay? They're going to say, Lincoln is trustworthy because every time he is always, and anybody I talk to who knows him says the exact same thing. That's part of your brand.
Right.
So one of the exercises I had and the students do is, I said, how would you describe yourself? They said, oh, I'm, a fun, trustworthy person. I said, okay. Who here agrees with that? And some people were like, I don't agree with that. Yeah. And they were like, what? You don't even know me. I was like, wait a minute, they've been in school with you for 2 years already.
They know you better than you know you. Yeah.
So the question is always, you may have an idea about who you are in your head, but the whole world has a whole different view of you.
Right.
How do you reconcile that? You have to first say, okay, I clearly believe myself to be this because I want to be this. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not giving that off, then what do I need to do different? Because I do want other people to see me like that. Right. If I'm a great person, I want other people to see my greatness. So what am I doing wrong? Why am I not being seen in that way?
Right. And it's all about, it goes back to knowing yourself.
Exactly.
Knowing who you are so that you can communicate that effectively.
And living in your truth. Now, here's the thing. People will say, well, why aren't we caring too much about what other people think? I'm not saying that the guy walking down the street has to know.
You don't have to define your self-worth based on that.
I'm not.
But it's a tool for success.
And not only that, but keep in mind, what we're saying is that recognizing the fact that you need people in your life. You want that hookup? Does that person who has access see you as a person they want to do business with? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're not going to be everything to everybody. Nobody is. And you don't have to worry about being something for everybody. It's not about that. Identifying what you want in life. You're saying you want to be, you want to be the next scientist or an astronaut. You want to be an astronaut? Okay. When you go around astronauts, do they feel that you're capable of being an astronaut? No. Okay, then you want to be an astronaut, so you need to be...
You got to walk the walk. Yeah.
You need to be seen by the other astronauts as a potential astronaut.
Yeah, it reminds me of this quote, common music industry lingo. A lot of people want to act... What is it? In discussing like how to become really successful, people use Beyonce as the example. And they say, you're acting like Beyonce now at 40. You got to be acting how Beyonce was acting at 19 to get to where she is at 40. So don't replicate the result, replicate the process.
Yes, so, love it. Because that goes into some of the definitions that we put into the curriculum.
Yeah.
Process. You got to go through the process, and the process cannot be skipped. You can't shortcut it. You can't do anything like that. You got to go through the process, and you have to have patience.
Yeah.
Okay. Patience with yourself to go through that process, and patience with the process itself.
Absolutely. And that's tough. Yeah.
And we try to skip through all the way. We try to avoid all the hard parts of the process. Again, avoidance. But you end up paying for it later on.
Yeah.
So we, all of these, that's why I say all this stuff is connected. We talk about social capital. We talk about getting the actual knowledge, knowing yourself. You can't generate social capital if you don't know yourself.
Right.
Okay? Because you're going to find yourself making mistakes with the wrong people because you weren't aware that you actually are a ticking time bomb, right?
Yeah.
And that you said the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time, right?
Right.
You know, you have to know who you are so you can then interact with people. So our first step is always knowing who you are. Freshmen have to get that. Sophomores get knowing about the world around them, okay? Knowing how this world, now they know about themselves, now they know how the world reacts to them and how they interact with it, right? So for example, we'll say, let's read a news article, and we'll do like a kind of reverse outline where we review the news article, and then we'll say, what was the point of the article, right? And then gather some supporting evidence within the article to support what you say is the point of the article itself. So why is that? Because we have to learn how to look at things a different way, right? We have to learn how to see how these things influence us all the time. The only way you can learn how things influence you is to learn about it. So let me put it another way. If commercials, right? You remember these jingles? This is something else that we would do for the sophomores. We'll play a jingle, right? How's that you know this commercial, right? Because you hear it all the time. But why do they play it all the time? So you can remember it, right? But why does it matter to remember it, right? Because they want you to get so comfortable with the product that it makes you feel a certain way, a good way, and when you see it, you know what? You want to buy it. Because the feeling of that good feeling comes with the purchase and having it, right?
Right.
The motto, like, you know, you can have it your way. Oh, I want it my way. I'm going to go to Burger King. I can have it my way, right? It's subliminal.
Yep.
And you don't even think about it. But you find yourself buying these products simply because of great marketing.
Yeah.
Right? Understanding how that works will allow you to understand how it affects your behavior.
All these different layers of critical thinking and introspection. It's just, and I want to pause here because we're going to get more into this in the next episode, but it is such a unique experience for high school students to be getting this content. And I think, and you would agree, that this is part of the problem of the education system.
Right.
Why is this such a novelty?
Right.
Why is this so unique to Real World Academy?
Right.
So let's pause here, tune into the next episode to get into that content. And thank you all for listening to Keeping It Real. Thank you for listening to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy. If you're a student looking for a mentor or a parent looking to help your kid design a happy life and a successful career, visit our website at realworldacademy.org and subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts to hear more exclusive content on how to design your future.